Welcome to the reading of Chapter 11 of The Oath by Frank Peretti. Well, by this time, Dr. Benson has more or less discovered that what he's after may be a little bit more clever than he thinks it is. And he definitely believes it's no longer a bear. But he's also seeing things that doesn't quite add up. And he's trying to figure out just what it was that they shot at. So now's the time for him to start asking more questions. So let's go on ahead and get into it. Discretion is advised. I cannot guarantee what we are going to be reading into. I mean, I know, but I don't know which chapters is and what. Anyway, discretion is advised. There is violence, there is fire, there is, well, we have talked in the past about Harold's scare tactics as he tries to intimidate the other children, and I'm afraid he still lapses into such behavior from time to time. Today, during recess, he found a garter snake, cut off its head, and told two girls the same thing would happen to them if they didn't let him copy their homework. The tale about the pet monster who eats children came up again as well. I think another parent-teacher conference would be in order. From a letter by Marion Clayburgh, Harold Bly's fourth grade teacher, to Sam and Lois Bly, circa 1960. Boy, oh, Harold, he's a brat. Chapter 11, Charlie. When Harold Bly came knocking at Dottie Moore's door, she was almost expecting it. The town, in its peculiar hush-hush way, I got so many animals in this house, had been buzzing about Vic's disappearance since Thursday night, and the news was bound to reach Bly's ears sooner or later. Now it was Saturday afternoon, and he stood at her door, dressed up, cleaned up, the perfect gentleman, his hat in his hand, and asked if she'd heard anything. She was sick with dread and worry, but knew she was obliged to talk to him. She told him what he had to know already. "I haven't heard a thing, Mr. Bly, not a thing. Some of the guys went looking for him up the draw, and I think they've checked the river downstream." "No calls?" he asked. "No, no calls. I've been on the phone with Phil and Carl, and I talked to Pastor Woods, too. Everybody's looking and calling around." "Have you called the sheriff?" In Hyde River, there was only one correct answer to that question. "No. You know how Vic feels about that." Bly nodded with understanding. "Listen, Dottie, if there's anything I can do, please let me know. I'm here to help, you know that." Again, her response was correct. "I know. I appreciate it." And that goes for the financial side of things, too. I know you and Vic were struggling, Ann. "We were doing all right." It was as if he didn't hear her. "If it comes down to it, and you feel you need to move on to a better life somewhere else, just remember I'm ready and willing to unburden you." She was offended, but guarded her answer. "If you want to buy the business, you'll have to talk to Vic." Unruffled, he only smiled at her. "I'm sure you and I will talk again," meaning Dottie knew that she had no option. That night in the ruins, another prayer was said at the stone, and another scrap of paper was burned. This one bore the name of Dottie Moore. Sunday morning, Carl Engfeldt went into Charlie's, sat on a bar stool between Phil Garrett and Andy Schooler, who were already eating, and ordered the number 2 breakfast, ham and 2 eggs with toast. Bernie was the only one there to take his order. After he went into the kitchen to fry it up, Carl asked quietly, "Where's Charlie?" Phil and Andy looked at him with a secret in their eyes. Says he's sick, said Phil. Andy added, he's been sick since Friday morning, you know that? Carl was getting the picture. Since we found out Vic disappeared. He's hiding, that's what, Phil said. And I'll thank you to keep your mouth shut, Andy said. Well, he thinks he's next, that's what I think. Andy stiffened. There was fire in his eyes as he said, you keep talking about it and we're all dead. Now shut up. Phil surrendered. Hey, sorry. We've got more trouble, Carl said. I just got a call from Sarah down at the RV park. That professor is back. Andy and Phil said nothing, but their stunned faces said everything. Carl continued. Pulled in with his camper last night, all set to stay a while. I thought you said he was gone, Phil protested. He was. Sarah said he looked like he'd been out hunting. Didn't look like he'd got anything, though. They looked at one another. Then Phil ventured. Could be Harold's right. He thinks, he lowered his voice, that Tracy and the professor have taken a shine to each other. That professor's what started the trouble in the first place, Carl said, pounding his fist on the counter. It's too bad about his brother, but if he'd just left things alone. Harold says it's going to be just like Maggie and that guy's brother all over again. Does Doug know about it? Andy asked. Ain't nothing to know yet, but I'm betting Harold's right. Carl took a swallow of coffee. Well, if she's gone soft on that guy, there's going to be a change in the rules around here. You got that right, Andy said. I don't care if she wants to play sheriff, but if she's gonna, the front door opened. It was Deputy Tracy Ellis in uniform. Apparently, they were on business. Good morning. Good morning, said Bernie, the fry cook. He was just setting Carl's plate in front of him. Morning, the three conferees muttered into their breakfast plates. She approached the bar in a casual mood. Is Charlie here? No, said Bernie. He's been pretty sick the last few days. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. She looked at the three men who looked back at her with the familiar Hyde River expression reserved for strangers. She smiled and laughed a little, hoping that would loosen things up. Hey, guys, nobody's in trouble. I just wanted to say hi. Well, said Phil. Hi. Hi, said Carl. Hi, said Andy, going back to his eggs. So, is Charlie at home? She asked. Phil said nothing. Andy shrugged. Carl started to say, I don't know, and Bernie answered directly. Yeah, he's stuck at home. I don't think he's going anywhere. Phil dropped his fork and grabbed it again before it ran off the bar. Tracy said thanks and went out. The moment the door closed, Bernie received a concert of rebukes. Are you nuts? What'd you tell her for? She's snooping around again, can't you tell? Bernie just threw up his hands. Hey, she asked me, I told her. What's the big deal? Ah, forget it, said Andy. Phil started to say, we think maybe she's... Forget it, Andy insisted. So Phil did. Bernie went back to work in the kitchen. The three ate in silence for a moment. She looked pretty nice, Carl observed. Smelled nice too, said Phil. Little bit of perfume, little bit of makeup, eh? Doug's gonna kill that guy, muttered Andy. An hour later, Tracy eased her Ford Ranger to a halt near the gutted shell of an old filling station. Steve appeared from behind a rusting truck chassis and climbed in. Charlie's at home, she told him. I called him and he's expecting us. How can you be sure he's the Frenchman? Oh, I think I heard him using that accent in the tavern one night. He never was very good at it. Steve crouched down below the windows while Tracy drove up the hill past the church and then doubled back the next road over, easy down behind Charlie's two little bedroom house with the white lap siding and green metal roof. They were trying to avoid being seen, but in this town, secrecy was nearly an impossible dream, and they knew it. They went to the back door, and Tracy knocked. There was no answer. Charlie? Tracy called, not too loudly. He was just inside the door. Who is it? It's Tracy Alice. Did you bring the professor? Yes, he's right here with me. They heard a chair slide away from the door, and then the rattling of the lock, and finally the door opened a crack. Charlie took a look first, then opened the door so they could come in. Without a word between them, Tracy and Steve knew they were seeing a repeat of Maggie Blythe's condition, the same nightmare revisited. The kitchen was a case study in neglect, with cupboard doors left open, all the counters cluttered with food, dishes, jars, and containers from the refrigerator. The living room was a mess as well, and dark. The draperies were all pulled. It was hot and stuffy, and the air was permeated with a horrible smell, as if something had died. Some boards had been nailed across the front door, and a large stuffed chair had been pushed against it. A crude cross made of sticks lashed together with duct tape hung on the door, and to one side a hunting rifle leaned against the wall, apparently loaded and ready. Charlie was a dirty, pitiful, sweat-soaked mess, wearing only pajama bottoms and a t-shirt stretched tightly over his round belly. His hair was disheveled, and his crooked glasses had slid down his slick face, so they were even more crooked. He was crouching a little, as if expecting gunfire through the windows any moment, and fingering an oversized bronze crucifix hanging around his neck. Sorry for the mess, he said in a trembling voice. Why don't you sit down, Charlie? Tracy suggested in a gentle voice. The man hesitated as if unsure what she meant, then sank onto the couch, clutching the crucifix in a shaking hand, his face contorted and his eyes filled with fear. Tracy also sat down on the couch, and Steve pulled a chair over. Charlie just sat there, looking from Steve to Tracy and back again. Charlie, Tracy began, do you know why we're here? Charlie looked at Steve. You're back. You came back. Steve nodded. I thought we should talk face to face. Charlie looked at Tracy. Vic Moore is gone. Did you know that? Before she could answer, Charlie turned to Steve. Did you see anything down in Old Town? So you're the Frenchman? Steve asked. Charlie sat there dumbfounded, caught and speechless. Tracy touched his arm. Charlie, it's okay. We're here to help. Charlie swallowed, his throat dry. It wants me next. Please, you can't let it take me. Can't let what take you? Steve asked. It was as if Charlie's brain had malfunctioned. He looked at Steve and tried to answer, but his mouth refused to form the words. Steve took over. Charlie, listen. We both went back to Old Town Friday night and the night after Vic disappeared. We staked the place out and we saw something. Ah! Charlie let out a weak little wail of terror and put his finger in his mouth. Steve quickly recapped the previous night's events, saying only as much as he thought the trembling man could take. Charlie drew no comfort from the tale. That was obvious. Did you kill it? Charlie cried. Did you kill it? Steve was sorry to answer. No, it got away. Charlie wailed louder as he clutched his heart. Now we're all dead. You didn't kill it. Now it's only matter. Tracy insisted. Charlie, do you know what it is? The very question terrified him, and his brain seemed to go on the fritz again. Steve pressed the question. We saw something, Charlie. We heard it. We tracked it all night. So there's more to this thing than just. Steve didn't want to say superstition, not to Charlie. You've got to kill it. You've got to kill it before it takes us all. We need your help, Charlie. You need to tell us anything you know about the creature. The cops never do anything. They just stand around and do what Harold tells them. That annoyed Tracy a bit, but she wasn't about to argue with someone half out of his mind. Charlie leaned toward Steve in earnest. I thought you could do it. You're an outsider. You don't owe anybody anything. You're not afraid. You could do it. You've got to do it. Do it before the dragon finds out. Having let that dreadful word slip, he cried out in pain and looked about the room as if the thing would come through the walls at him. Ah, I can't tell you. Why not? Tracy demanded. He looked at her dumbly. Why not? She demanded again. You talk about it, it gets mad and you get killed. Tracy looked around the room. So if you don't talk about it, you're going to get killed anyway, right? He couldn't answer. Did Vic ever tell anybody about the dragon? No. So what happened to him? At the thought of Vic, Charlie just stuttered. So what difference does it make? I can't. Tracy stood up. Okay, Charlie. Tell you what, you help us, we'll help you. You keep stonewalling and we're out of here. It'll be just you and the dragon. He can have you anytime he wants. It was as if she'd dropped a stick of dynamite at his feet. No, no, he cried. She stood in her place and looked down at him, waiting. He just sat there, his brain numbed by fear, by generations of tradition. Steve grabbed Charlie's arm and leaned in close. Charlie, we shot it, and I think we hit it, so it's not a ghost or a spirit or a god. It's an animal, and that's all. There doesn't have to be anything mysterious about it. It was a tiny germ of hope, at least. It seemed to calm him. I'm running on. Sorry. We'll read that again. There doesn't have to be anything mysterious about it. It was a tiny germ of hope, at least. It seemed to calm him. Charlie looked from Steve to Tracy and back again. Can you kill it? I'll pay you to kill it. Charlie, Steve said, listen to me. I don't need money. I need information. I need to know what I'm up against, what its habits are, its strengths, its weaknesses. I have to be able to anticipate its behavior. Sorry about that. And my nose keeps itching because I just loved on my dog. Charlie shook his head. But if I talk about the dragon will know. Who says? Said Tracy. No answer. Did Harold tell you that? He shook his head in fear. I'm not talking about Harold. Then he looked up at the ceiling and shouted as if to God. I'm not talking about Harold. I'm not saying anything about him. Okay. Calm down, Charlie. Tracy shot a glance at Steve. Harold Bly again. I'm not talking about him, Charlie repeated. Are you afraid of Harold Bly? I'm not talking about him. And you won't tell us anything about the dragon either? Charlie just sat there staring into space. Tracy sighed and looked at Steve, about to give it up. Then Charlie muttered, I don't know why the dragon's gotta pick on us. We didn't do anything. It's the Hydes. They're the ones who did it. Tracy was almost afraid to ask a question for fear Charlie would clam up again. The Hyde family, you mean? They're the ones who brought us all the trouble, and that was 100 years ago. I'm not a Hyde. I didn't ask for any trouble. Why's the dragon have to come after me? Steve ventured. What did the Hyde family do 100 years ago? Made a deal with the dragon, that's what. They gave him the town, but I didn't give him the town. Nobody asked me. Calmly, carefully, Steve asked, so are there particular people in this town who have contact with the dragon? Does the dragon work for them? Charlie nodded. Oh yeah, you bet. Make a wrong move or say too much and he made a slashing sound and ran his finger across his throat. Then he added loudly, but I'm not talking about Harold. No, of course not. The dragon knows where you are. He could come after you, tear you apart and eat you while you're sleeping. I doubt he could get in here, Steve said, looking at all the precautions Charlie was taking. I don't know. Maybe he can. Harold says, I've heard the dragon could go anywhere. He's like a ghost. He's not really alive. He just floats around and he can disappear. You can't stop him. He's not a ghost, Steve insisted. He's a big, dumb animal, and somebody's been lying to you. That kind of talk scared the man. No, don't talk that way. The dragon will know. Tracy rolled her eyes. Now you're starting to sound like Levi Cobb. The magic word again. Tracy may have used it on purpose, Steve thought. Charlie was offended, which snapped him out of his stupor. Hey, no, 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 that isn't fair, and it isn't true. I'm not crazy. Levi's crazy. I'm not. I think you're giving the dragon way too much credit, just like Levi does, Tracy said. Those were fighting words for Charlie. I'm not like Levi. I'm not a bigot and a crackpot and a religious nut. He is. I'm a fair and honest businessman, and I've got a right to do what I'm doing. Tracy was fishing. Is that so? Yeah, that's so. Ebo Denning was never going to go any place with that mercantile. I'm going to make it go places. I'm going to bring some life back to this town. It was the right thing to do, and I gave Ebo a fair price. So what are you afraid of? He fell silent, still fuming. Then he finally blurted, just kill that thing, that's all. You kill that thing and everything else will be fine. Steve sighed heavily. He was beginning to lose his patience. So what can you tell us about it? He asked again. I don't know anything. Tracy tried another approach. So tell us somebody who does know something. What about Jules Cryer? Charlie asked. Sorry, said Tracy, not recalling the name. He's working a claim up on Saddle Horse, been there for years. He's got a perfect view of the whole valley from up there, and he lives as he pleases, does what he wants. How do we get there? He's a hermit, though, and I hear he's kind of strange. He might shoot you just for coming close to his claim. I don't know. It's a start, said Steve, taking out his pen and pad. Give us some directions. While Charlie dictated how to get to Jules Cryer's cabin, Tracy recalled another name. There's also Clayton Gentry. He's a young fellow, a logger down toward Backup. The guys at Charlie's can't say anything nice about him. It never occurred to me until now, but maybe he's seen something and talked about it, and that's why the guys don't like him. Steve finished writing the directions. Anybody else? Charlie shrugged. I don't know anything, and I'm not really talking about anything. No, Steve agreed. You sure aren't. We'll check these people out, Tracy said. In the meantime, Charlie, he looked at her. Whatever you do, stay away from Old Town. You hear me? I do believe that may be the shortest chapter in this book. I believe. So tomorrow we will read chapter 12. I am very sorry that I didn't read yesterday. I was a little sidetracked with other things, and so I just didn't get to it. But I hope that you all are enjoying the reading of this book, and it's really going to start getting a little bit more traction from here on out, because you're going to find out just what this dragon is. And you're going to want to stay tuned. The finale is incredible. It truly is. The finale is incredible. But we're only halfway through the book. So anyway, I appreciate you all and thank you very much for listening. And I'm sorry that you got to stare at my old face while you hear it. So my advice, just get into something. listen to me read while you're wiping down the kitchen or something. That way you don't have to stare at me. Anyway, I appreciate y'all, and I hope that y'all have a great and blessed day.